Hey, thanks for joining me here today on What's in the Box. This past week, I was lucky enough to get out in all this Haulathon craziness that Neca has going on with Target and pick up a couple figures. Uh, the point for me going out was to get a Gargoyles Demona, but I ended up lucking into a couple others, and good old Ash here was one of them. I didn't really plan on picking up this figure per se. I am very much an Evil Dead 2 fan. Uh, I've honestly only watched the first movie two, maybe three times tops. Uh, for the time I watched it, which was much later than when it came out, it was a little hokey, and I had just kind of become used to the comically over the top ED2 type stuff. I did pick up this figure because I wanted a closer look at it and I wanted to review it for you guys. Um, what we'll do is, as always, start off with the figure itself. And I feel that it's fairly accurate, obviously, clothing wise. I think the shirt color is a little off. It might have needed to be a little more muted, maybe not as bright. It's one solid color with nothing more than some highlights done on the wrinkles. The pants are pretty decent. They too are sort of just one color, and instead of highlights this time it's sort of a darker wash look. He has some moccasins on, and those are done all right. Again, a wash. His hands are just a straight plastic color. There's no real paintwork there. And the heads are similar with some paintwork in the eyes, the brows, and the 5 o'clock shadow, the stubble. I've seen a few people already complaining about this figure online, particularly the head. I don't think it's that far off from Bruce, especially Bruce in that film. He wasn't quite the somewhat macho, goofy caricature of Ash that he became in ED2 and Army of Darkness and Ash versus the Evil Dead. So his look was slightly different, and he was considerably younger. I think they were 19 or 20 when they filmed that movie, and I think probably mid to late 20s at the least by the time ED2 came around. Anyway, I think as far as heads go, your two primary heads that look the most like Bruce are the standard Sirius head, and then, well, I mean, a slight variation of the Sirius head over here. If I had a critique, it's maybe that the skin tone is a little too light, too pinkish, and that might be throwing people. The sculpt is fairly decent. It does kind of capture his youth and his look at the time. They didn't quite capture the unibrow that Bruce had going on, but luckily they left it out, to be honest with you. Yeah, he has, I mean, as usual with Neca, the eyes are painted well. The skin's pretty decent, and he has sort of a stubble look there. Now, the head that looks the least like Bruce is the shocked head. He's just sort of, I don't know. Like, when you start to mess with the basic features of a head, it starts to get away from the actual character or actor. And this is just a little bit off the way it's expressing here. So yeah, I mean, it's okay, but probably the least used head of this set. Now we can move on to articulation, which of course he has pretty much the standard articulation. He can do a somewhat limited T-pose. His arms can bend at the elbow and of course pivot. The same with the wrists, up and down, and a bit of a pivot there. Fairly standard. He has, of course, the knee bend, the thigh bend, He has some at the waist. It's not too bad. He does not have any kind of ab crunch. I mean, that might mess up the overall aesthetic of the shirt, so I can see kind of why they didn't go there. But it would have been nice to have a little bit of movement. You can get some from the waist, but it's so little, so little. And then, of course, you have the feet. Those are fairly limited as well. I mean, I can't get much movement out of it, but you do get front to back pretty easily. And then, of course, all the standard head articulation that you would want. He does have a stationary neck, but at the jaw, he's able to move around and rotate. He can't look up too much, but he can look down quite a bit. So not too shabby articulation-wise. Now, as far as accessories go, he comes with 2 extra right hands. One is to hold the lantern, and one is to hold the shotgun, axe, stuff like that. So, not bad. Not bad at all. Then, of course, we can move on to the lantern. At one point in the film, Scotty, he goes down into the cellar, and when he doesn't come back up, Ash goes down looking for him, and he uses this particular lantern in that scene. Pretty well painted. It's one solid sort of dark silver color with maybe a little shading. I don't know if that's airbrush or just how the metallic paint looks, but pretty good there. I love that the globe is see-through and you can see a little flame inside there. The handle doesn't articulate, but that's okay. It's already sculpted at a pitch, and that's what you need if you want a character holding it. So good job there. Now, of course, we can move on to the axe. This is a little inaccurate. Well, inaccurate to some degree. In the film, they use a single-bladed axe. Scott takes this axe to Cheryl at one point, and then chops up Shelly with the single-bladed axe. This is the double-bladed. This is only seen in the promotional poster for the film. You'll remember this by the fact that Ash has the axe slung over one shoulder and a shotgun in the other hand. It's really well done. It's actually quite well done. It's one of their better looking axes. It's got a nice tan color underneath, but a really good wash over that, and it shows through to the grain. The grain is also sculpted in and looks good. The head of the axe is a dark silver, similar to the lantern, as you can see. Maybe slight color difference there, but also done really well. You can see some texture in there and some shine, so great. Next up is the shotgun. It's fairly standard. It has a dark metal to it, a wooden handle. Pretty much the only time this is used is when Ash takes a shot at Cheryl, his sister, through the door, and it hits her square in the face. Fairly plain. It does have a little bit of a wash to the handle, and that's decent enough for a gun. Next up, we have the chainsaw. A version of this would, of course, become classic to any horror fan, and especially Evil Dead fans in general. I don't believe this is the eventual chainsaw in ED2. I think this might be a different model. It looks quite a bit different from Evil Dead 2. In the movie, it has an XL2, I think, logo on the side of it. That may have been something NECA couldn't use, but then again, that's understandable. The chainsaw is painted really well. It has a nice amount of wear over the red paint. It has a silver handle, as you can see here. The blade is both silver and black. And yeah, I think it's perfect for him. This will easily go into his hand. I believe this hand would be part of a chainsaw holding hand as well. But good stuff. I mean, there's a nice amount of weathering on this. So perfect. Perfect for old Ashy Slashy. And then finally we get another iteration of the recorder, seen through pretty much every movie and series the character is in. I don't know if this is specific to the first film. It may be. I really don't know the difference between the recorders, but it's nice to have. Now, the figure did miss a couple things. At one point, Ash uses a shovel to decapitate Linda. Yes, he does this in the first movie as well. And the thing that I think is missing from this set most is that very early, creepy, small version of the Necronomicon. You just haven't seen that in any other toys, and it would have been nice to have had that. Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to have that. It had a freaking human ear on the back of it, and it was actually skin colored instead of sort of a dark tan. But yeah, they missed those two items, which, I mean, if this is an Ultimate Ash, those should have been included. But they chose wisely for the most part. Now, overall thoughts as far as this figure goes, I think is pretty great, especially if you're a fan of that first movie. It's worth picking up. Appearance is pretty good. Like I mentioned, the shirt is a little off, maybe a little too bright. The shocked head just is a little off, and the overall look is probably off just by skin tone alone, but otherwise decent. So it wouldn't quite make it a 5, but a 4 is a pretty solid rating for it. Articulation, well, he's limited in ab crunch, kind of limited in the waist articulation, and his feet especially are limited. You couldn't get much side to side, and you could only get a little bit front to back, and that becomes a posing issue. So I really can't give it more than a 3 articulation wise. Accessories, he has a lot of accessories. They cover almost everything you need to cover in the film. Again, it's missing the shovel for Linda's decapitation, and it's missing the Necronomicon. If you wanted to go even further with that and get super nitpicky, it'd be nice if one of these figures eventually came with Linda's magnifying necklace. But, I mean, they pretty much do it all, except for those two main things, the shovel and the Necronomicon. But, so, yeah, I'll just give it a 4 based on that. So what do I think overall? I think it's yet another decent entry for NECA. Does have the issues I've mentioned, but those can kind of be overlooked, especially if you're a huge fan of this film. Yeah, the lightness is off on one head. The skin color might be off and could have helped the other heads and the hands, but it's okay. It's better than what we've had before, which is nothing. I hate to be that way, and I hate to constantly praise NECA, but they really are at the top of their game in this scale, and no one else quite does it like them. But again, I did ding them on a little articulation and a little bit appearance and accessories, so it doesn't quite get a perfect 5, but very few of the figures that I review do get a perfect 5. So if you get a chance, it's part of Haulathon, NECA and Target teaming up to help out the scalpers. Sorry, I just had to get that jab in there. But yeah, if you find it on a shelf, find yourself lucky. Buy it up if you're a fan of this series. But hopefully you'll get one, and hopefully you'll join me on my next review. I'll catch you next time.